Welcome everybody to our winch training class. This is class number 3. We did a 3-part series, so this is the 3rd class in the training series. And so tonight we're doing an overview and a question and answer on using your winch and winch safety. And I'm just going to take 1 second, ladies, make sure that my sound is working. Yep. Sorry about that. Sometimes it's hard when you're doing it all by yourself to make sure that all the technology pieces are working. So tonight is our class number 3, and it is our overview and our question and answer on using your winch and winch safety. So just a quick reminder, I am Kristen DeLibero, and I am here from LadyJeepers.com. And LadyJeepers.com is doing this online training class for us tonight. And then just another quick note, due to the software that I'm using, the program that I'm using to do this training class tonight for you ladies, I cannot see any comments or who's on here with me. So when we're finished with all of the training class, I will jump back over and you'll be able to see me, and I can see comments and questions, and we'll jump over there at the end of the training. So I just want you to know, unfortunately, I can't see any comments till the end. And so we're going to start with kind of our overview. So a quick overview from our class number 1. So let's start with the recovery equipment that you're going to need to have. So, you really want a good recovery kit. So in your recovery kit, you want to have a pair of gloves, and I recommend getting a pair of winch gloves. They're going to be a little different than you can get like all sorts of different kinds of gloves, but the winch gloves are going to have padding on the hand and the fingers. They're going to help you a little bit more, especially if you still have a cable line. You want to make sure you have good protection for your hands. That's so important. So you want to make sure you have a good pair of winch gloves. Then you want to make sure that you have a snatch block, a tree saver. And again, we went over all this in depth in our first class. So the tree saver is going to be a little different strap because it's going to have padding. It's going to be a little bit shorter so that when it goes around the tree, it's going to help to protect the tree. Then you want to make sure you have a snatch strap or a longer strap, D-rings or soft shackles. And then you want to throw in there a wrench or a pair of pliers just in case. Especially with the metal D-rings, if they have been on your Jeep for a long period of time and you go to undo them, sometimes they can be really tough to get off. So always make sure you have a wrench or a good pair of pliers in there just in case you're going to need them. And I know you don't see these as much anymore, but always recommended to have a strap damper in your recovery kit. That's going to go over your line when you're winching to help protect you if it were to break or to come undone or anything like that. In a pinch, a sweatshirt or a towel put over the line can work as well, but they do make the actual strap damper, and always recommend having that as well. Always make sure that you double check all of your equipment. So you also want to check your winch line or cable, all of your cords and wiring that are going to go into your Jeep, into your winch. You want to make sure everything is in good condition so that you don't have frays, you don't have cracks, anything like that that could lead to an incident or an issue when you're out on a ride or on a trail and you need to use your winch. You want to make sure everything is in good working condition so you know it's going to work if you need it. So then the next thing I want to talk about is understand your winch and your winch remote. So this is going to be an overview from our class number 2. So if you have a wireless remote, you're going to have to actually go to the winch itself, and you're going to have to turn on the power to the winch at the back of the winch itself. So you can kind of see my finger in that picture. That is the back of my Warren winch, and that is the on-off switch to the winch itself. So always make sure you turn the power on to the winch first, because if you don't have the power on at the winch itself, then your wireless remote is not going to connect. So always go turn on the winch at the front of your vehicle at the winch itself first. Then you're going to turn the power on to your remote and you're going to select the winch option. So I know some of the winches are different makers, different models. So this one again is a Warn wireless winch. So that's what my remote looks like. So when you power it on, you have options. So you're going to power it on and then you're going to go to the winch option to select it. And then that means it is talking to your winch itself. Once it's on, you'll follow the directions for the arrows for in and out. So you have, as you can see on the remote itself, it has the arrow that shows it pointing out and then the arrow that shows it pointing in. So that then you can just follow the arrows to let out line and to bring line in. So if you have a traditional remote, and this is going to be, a cord that you actually attach to the side of your winch. So on the actual side, this is a Warren. Again, this is just an older model on my older YJ. So it has an older winch on it. It's been there quite a while. But so as you can see on the side of it, there's actually a plug on the side of the winch itself where you're going to plug the cord into the side of the winch. Then you're going to use your toggle switch. As you can see, it has a little diagram. So it shows an arrow going out and looks like the line is spooling out. And then underneath it's the opposite. The line is pointing the other direction and it looks like it's starting to come in. So you're going to use your toggle for in and out on this particular winch. Something to think about if you do have this kind of, I call it a cable winch, but where you're actually going to hook the cable to the side of it. As you can see all the little holes, make sure you always line up the prong and there's a little cut and groove on the inside of the plug where you're going to plug it into the winch. So always make sure everything is lined up and it's going to slide in. You shouldn't feel like you have to jam it in. You should feel like it will slide kind of on its own in once you have it lined up. So now we're going to talk about to recover using your winch. So again, an overview from our class number 2. So anytime you're doing any kind of recovery or using your winch, always make sure that you put your vehicle in park. Or if you have a manual, you're going to turn it off and you're going to put it in gear. So that's going to hold it. You always want to try to put it in a forward gear, like a first or second. And always make sure your emergency brake is on. And if you're on a hill or you're in a situation where maybe you're really off camber, you can add a chalk to a back tire for safety. So, I mean, that could be like a big rock. It could be, like a big stick, anything that's going to be big, that's going to hold if your vehicle were to try to roll. So that's going to keep it from moving as you're trying to hook up your winch and your equipment. So safety first. Always make sure it's in park or in gear. Always make sure your emergency brake is on. And if you're on a hill or off camber in a harder situation, go ahead and chalk a tire. So once you've done that, you're going to get out and you're going to connect your remote and have your winch ready. So we just went over that. It'll depend on if you have a wireless or if you have the actual cable that you're going to hook into the side of your winch. So now we're going to talk about recovery to a tree with a straight line. So this is a semi-straight pull so that wherever you're going, you have a tree that's, it doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line, but it's a pretty straight pull to be able to get you out and to be able to pull you the distance to the tree that you're going to use as a straight line. And you're not going to have any other trees or brush or anything in your way. So the first thing that you're going to do, let me move this little thingy. Sorry, ladies. We don't need to see that. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to put your tree saver around the base of the tree. So you want to try to get your tree saver as low as possible on the trunk of the tree so that you're down towards the ground. You don't want to have your strap up high because, again, we're talking about force. A lot of this is physics. I was horrible at science, but when we start talking about using our winch and recovery, we really are talking about science because we're talking about pull, we're talking about angles, we're talking about, all the different things that go into the force, the weight of the pull, all those different things. So when you're thinking about where the force of the pole is going to be, where the weight is going to go to. You always want to make sure the strap is low on the tree because we want to be pulling down on the front of the vehicle. So first thing you're going to do is put your tree saver around the base of the tree and open your D-ring or shackle. Then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to put both ends of the strap through the D-ring or the shackle. So you're going to make sure that your strap is flat. You want to make sure it's not twisted, it's not kinked anywhere, it's nice and flat. And then you're going to make sure that you get both ends of that tree saver strap through your D-ring. And then if you have a factor 55 hook, you can run the pin through the hook. So as you can see in here, as you're going to close the D-ring, you can actually put the pin of the D-ring through the front of the hook and then close your D-ring. When you close your D-ring, you're going to tighten it all the way, and then you're going to do a quarter turn back to loosen it. The reason you do that is, again, we're talking about force. The amount of force and pressure that's going to be put on that D-ring and that pin as you're using your winch can sometimes cause it to bind. And if it's too tight and there's no expansion room for the pin and for the metal itself, it can actually cause that D-ring to bind, and then it's stuck and you won't be able to get it open. So you always want to tighten it all the way and then just think a quarter turn back to loosen it just a little bit so that there's room for that metal to expand and to be able to take that force and to move without it binding and pinning that D-ring so that you won't be able to get it back off. So another way that you can run your strap, and if you have a traditional winch hook, so this is like a Warren winch, that is the hook on the front of it that kind of comes, we say stock a lot, so let's say stock. It comes stock with this winch. You can kind of see the picture on the left of the actual hook. These are kind of what you would call your traditional hooks. These are what are going to come on the winch. The new winches, some of them are coming with the aftermarket kind of factor 55 design or these new designed hooks on them that are a little bit safer. So I know we talked about it in class 1, but an upgrade for safety is definitely thinking about getting rid of this, factory hook that comes with your winch and upgrading to a factor 55 or an aftermarket hook in the front, because it's going to be a little bit safer than having these hooks that actually have the spring lever that opens and closes, because depending on the amount of pressure that gets put on those, they can break and malfunction. So they've come out with these newer, safer hooks. Safety's become a big thing. But if you do have a hook like this, so it's going to have the spring kind of pin that opens and closes the hook, what you can do is you're going to run the D-ring through the strap ends. So just like you did, or you saw that we did when we were running through the tree saver. So you're going to run both of them through the D-ring. You're going to close the pin in the D-ring again all the way tight, quarter turn to loosen, and then you're going to pull the straps around the side so that they're coming around the back and covering that pin so the front arc of your D-ring is exposed, kind of where the bend is. That is where you're going to place your hook. So if you have a hook, this is how you want to run it. And then you'll hook the hook through the front, the round part of your D-ring with your strap on the pin to your D-ring. So now we're going to talk about using a snatch block. And this is something we recommend using quite a bit for lots of different reasons. So you would hook everything up the same. If you're going to run your tree as your anchor, you're going to put your tree saver around your tree, and then you're going to run your winch line through your snatch block. So you're going to open your snatch block, run your winch line through it, and then you're going to close the top. So once you close your snatch block, then you're going to run the pin of your D-ring through the top of the snatch block. So as you can see, it's set up the same. You have your D-ring going through your rope. This is if you're going to run to a tree for an anchor. Then you're going to run your D-ring through the top of the snatch block. And again, tightening the pin all the way, quarter turn back so that it doesn't lock up on you. And then you're going to run the hook. So this is the hook of your winch cable. you're going to run it either back to your vehicle. So if you're recovering yourself and you're using a snatch block on a tree, to give yourself a little bit higher ratio, so there's going to be less weight that you're going to need to get the movement out of the winch in the vehicle. This is where snatch blocks add different ratios. So what it's doing is by adding the snatch block, it is requiring less weight, so less pull from the vehicle to be able to move the vehicle. Because anytime you add a snatch block, it's adding the ratio. And then what it's doing is it's taking the amount of weight that you need for the pull to be able to move something. So you can run it back to your vehicle if you're doing your own recovery with your own vehicle. You can also run this to another vehicle if you're using a different rig as your anchor point, or if you need to, you can run it to another tree as the anchor point. And if you do that, you would set that up just like we showed you before, just right before this. So it'd be tree saver, D-ring, and then your hook would go to the front of the D-ring. So that's where your actual winch hook would attach to your anchor point. So your anchor point is either going to be your vehicle, another vehicle, or to a tree. And as you can see in the bottom picture, that is the winch hook run back to a vehicle so that your D-ring is hooked to your vehicle. Another quick safety tip, don't ever hook a D-ring in a winch or any kind of tow strap or anything to a stock or plastic bumper. You want to make sure that it's reinforced so that when you're going to put all that weight on it, it's not just going to tear the D-ring out or just pull the bumper off. It's going to have an anchor point to anchor to so that you don't do any damage to your vehicle or someone else's vehicle if you're hooking to them. So those are 3 different ways that you can use a snatch block. So now we're going to talk about the multiple ways. So if you look at the example on the left, this is what we talked about first, a 1-to-1 ratio, which means you're running your winch cable directly to a tree or another vehicle as your anchor point and you're winching yourself out. The second example that we just showed you was running your winch line to your trees, your anchor point, and back to yourself. You can do this again as the example in the middle of a snatch block hooked to another vehicle and back to yourself. So anytime you're using your winch for safety reasons, for the less amount of stress and strain put on your winch or your vehicle, we always recommend using a snatch block. Now, you don't see as many people doing this anymore. They're just going to hook their winch directly to another vehicle or to a tree to winch themselves out. But if you're in a situation where you're really stuck or you're struggling with an obstacle or you're off camber and you're going to need some extra force, go ahead and add a snatch block. Because what you don't want to do is put all that extra strain and weight on your winch. So by adding the snatch block, it is going to help to distribute and make it so that with your ratio, you need less weight to actually move the vehicle forward. So just keep that in mind. And then back to our example on the left. So you can actually hook up multiple snatch blocks. So if you are really, really stuck, you're like marred in mud or really, really stuck on an obstacle, and it's going to take a lot to get you out, you can actually set up multiple snatch blocks in multiple locations so that it's going to take less force from your winch or your vehicle to get yourself out. So anytime you add a snatch block, imagine what that is doing is that is taking the weight off of the actual pull that you're going to need to be able to move the vehicle. So for every snatch block, it's making it easier on the winch and it's going to require less weight, so less pull from the winch to move the vehicle. So you can always hook it to a tree. You can then come back and hook another snatch block to yourself and then back to a tree as an anchor or another vehicle. So then the diagram over here on the right, far right, is another example I personally have had to use where you're going to use the tree really is more of a pivot point because you can't get to the correct angle with your vehicle to be able to get the other vehicle out. So what you're going to do is you're going to run the winch to the tree, the snatch block, like we just showed you how to hook it up. And then you're going to run it around to the vehicle that you're going to winch out. This is really important depending on the angle of the vehicle that needs to be winched out. So if it's your vehicle or if it's somebody else's vehicle, the terrain that's in front of them, and any obstacles. So I had to use this because we had a Jeep pinned between trees. So what I had to do is I was where it says stuck four-wheel drive, that was me. And he was the one over here where it says winching, but he was wedged between trees. So what I had to do is run my winch straight to the tree, over at the angle to him and hook to him, so then I could pull the back end of his Jeep around to get him off of the trees and get him out of the situation he was in where he was stuck. So you can also add angles with the snatch block as well. So just think about, even if you're doing a straight pull with yourself or you're doing a straight winch with somebody else, it is always a good idea. We always recommend using a snatch block. You know, it's only going to take a couple seconds longer to hook it up and unhook it, but it is worth setting yourself up to take that strain off of your winch, because there's nothing worse than getting out there trying to get unstuck and your winch overheats or starts getting too hot, and then you're going to have to stop a weight anyway, and you don't want to ruin the equipment that you have and that you've worked so hard to get. So I always recommend, anytime you pull your winch cable, put a snatch block on there. All that's going to do is help. So now we're going to talk about some different hooks and different ways that you can set them up. So as you can see, when we were showing you how to hook up the straps, this is a factor 55, but it does have, I call them the spring hook, where you're going to push down to put in your D-ring, and then it's going to close. But as you can see, you can run it to the front of the D-ring, or you can run it to the actual pin in the back of the D-ring. Now, anytime you are hooking up to another vehicle, like you can see on this right side, you always want to run the pin of the D-ring through the vehicle. So through wherever that point is that you're going to attach the D-ring to the vehicle. And then a couple things to remember when you're using your winch. You are responsible for your own vehicle, period. So this means whether you are hooking your winch up to get yourself out, or if you're going to hook your winch up to pull somebody else out, you're always responsible for your own vehicle. So my rule of thumb is I always want to hook up my vehicle, and I always want the other person to hook up theirs. So when I had to run the snatch block to get that gentleman out, I had him hook my hook from my winch to the back of his Jeep and his D-ring, so that he was responsible for hooking up the actual winch to himself. That way, if anything were to happen, if there was any damage done to his vehicle, he was the one that would have hooked it up. So it wasn't me hooking it to, like the left side D-ring or the right side D-ring or the center. You always want whoever's vehicle it is, they're ultimately responsible. So you are too. So if you're out and you get stuck and you need to use your winch, just remember, if people want to offer and want to help, that is great. But at the end of the day, you're ultimately responsible. So if somebody hooks up your winch wrong or creates the wrong angle or anything like that, and any damage is done to your vehicle while you are winching, it's your responsibility. So just keep that in mind. That's why it's so important to understand how to use your winch, how to hook yourself up, do it correctly, so that you don't ever have to allow somebody else to hook up your equipment for you. And again, it's great to have people offer to help. And I'm not saying, no, don't help me. Don't ever take help. But just remember that ultimate responsibility. When you think about it that way, it makes it a little bit easier to say, I'm responsible if something happens. I want to go ahead and hook it up. And, I've never heard anybody be like, what, or rude about that, because that really is kind of the code of conduct, if you think about it. So everybody will understand if you said, no, I just want to hook it up myself because, I'm ultimately responsible if something goes wrong. That's enough to nicely, politely say that. And most of the time people will be like, oh, okay, I totally understand. And they'll let you do it. And again, Takes a couple seconds longer, maybe a couple more minutes, but I always recommend use a snatch block. We want to save our equipment. So just remember that, because what we want to do is we want to let the winch do as much of the work as possible, but we don't want to strain our winch either and put so much work on our winch that it's going to overheat or we're going to start to have issues with it, because we want to take good care of our stuff. So when you think about letting the winch do as much of the work as possible, when you're in a situation where you have to winch yourself out or somebody else out, you want to put the vehicle in neutral and you want to allow the winch to slowly pull yourself out or the other person out. Um, Sometimes you'll see people when they're winching, they're going to put it in drive and they're spinning their tires, trying to get traction as they're using their winch. Well, what you're doing is, again, we're talking about, setting ourselves up for success and taking care of our vehicle and all of our parts. Anytime you start to put undue stress and extra stress on any parts of your vehicle, then you're setting yourself up to be more likely to have a parts failure, which means something's going to break. So when you're thinking about winching, you have your winch for a reason. And if you use your snatch block, you should know that you have done everything you can to help your winch. You've given it a little extra strength. It doesn't have to work as hard. Put your vehicle in neutral and use the winch to slowly pull yourself out and winch yourself in. Try not to put it in drive and be trying to hit the gas and spin the tires as you're trying to use your winch. That's a little counterproductive, but it also is putting you in a situation where you could break more parts. Now, there are times, you can slowly use the gas to slowly help to accelerate, especially if you're off camber and you're in a situation where you don't feel safe. But the worst thing that you can do is hit the gas and get the vehicle in front of the winch line. And then if you do go to say you're off camber and you do go to kind of go the rest of the way, you're not going to have the winch there to keep your vehicle tight and to keep it from rolling the rest of the way because you've gotten in front of it. So, the best rule of thumb is put in the extra time, hook up the snatch block, give your winch as much strength as possible, take as much load off of it as you can, but let the winch do the work. That's why you have it. And another thing is take your time. There is never a rush when doing a recovery. I know if you're out in a big group riding and there's a lot of people, if you get stuck, it can be nerve-wracking. You can get flustered. You might feel like, oh my gosh, I'm holding everybody up. Everybody's waiting on me. All those things that go through our mind. I call that negative self-talk. So this little voice that kind of just starts chirping in your mind, telling you all the horrible scenarios, stressing you out, telling you everybody's waiting, you're holding them up, all those things. And in reality, take a deep breath and realize every single person out there has had a situation where they either made a mistake or they got stuck or something happened, and everybody has had to learn. So no one is going to be out there with you going, hurry up, I'm going to get you unstuck. And if they are, that's not a great person to ride with, because you want to take your time. You want to be safe about making sure you hook up all of your pieces for your recovery correctly, and you want to make sure that you take your time to safely get your vehicle out without breaking anything. You don't want to do body damage. You don't want to tear off, tail lights, bumpers, things like that. So there's never a rush. And just remind yourself, everybody has been in that position where they've needed to pull their winch. They've needed to get themselves out. So everyone has been there and everyone is understanding. So don't ever put that extra stress and pressure on yourself of, oh my gosh, I got to hurry. I got to get out of here. I'm pulling everybody up. Everybody's waiting on me. Everybody's thinking this. Just when you start to think that and feel that, you need to just tell yourself, okay, stop. That's not reality. That is just you telling yourself something and getting yourself worked up. So biggest thing, take your time and take that extra pressure off yourself and just realize you're going to get out and it's going to be fine and nobody is going to be upset. So in class number 1, we went over in depth the recovery equipment that you need. So if you missed any of these classes, ladies, in this 3-part series, all the replays from these live classes are on the Facebook page. You can just scroll down and you can see them. So in class one, we went over the in-depth, the recovery equipment that you're going to need. And then in class number two, we went over how to use your winch and your recovery equipment. And again, if you missed this class, you can scroll down the page and the replays of all of these live classes that we have done together are on there so you won't miss anything. And then in tonight, we just did an overview. So we kind of covered everything, the recovery gear that you need, how to use your winch, how to use your recovery equipment. So we just did a quick overview.